7:13 right now, and we continue our coverage on a possible new ordinance that would give Chicago police power to enforce temporary curfew. So joining us now, Second Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins. So glad to have you here. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Anita.
You know, there were many who came out opposed to the initial earlier curfew that you proposed, and the mayor says this is a compromise and a step in the right direction. How do you feel about that characterization?
That's encouraging. The mayor was adamant in his opposition, and he has softened that opposition. It's not quite the same as support, but we're getting there. We still have some more conversations to have. I happen to chair the Public Safety Committee for the City Council, so I've agreed to have a hearing, and we'll bring in all the voices, including those who still have a problem with this concept, and possibly have the mayor's support by the end of this process. If there's some changes that need to be made in terms of how we would actually enforce this, I'm open to the conversation. It's a complicated thing to do.
It really is very complicated. You know, I like to look at our youth in the city and surrounding them with a village, right? We're all a part of the village. Clearly, because of their age, there have to be some boundaries there because they're still learning. We want the businesses to thrive. We want the neighbors to thrive, but we also want the kids to thrive. So it does get very complicated.
We do, and it was a coincidence that yesterday in the City Council, the mayor introduced a summary of all the youth programs that he's been supporting. Some he initiated, some were new, some were older programs that the mayor made a massive infusion of cash. We are doing so much now to help our youth, to guide them, to give them programs, support, counseling. We're doing all that, and we need to continue doing that. There's really no argument there. But when you have mass chaos and mayhem breaks out on the streets, that's not the time to talk about the job fair or the counseling sessions or the midnight basketball league. That doesn't help you in the immediate emergency situation.
Yeah, and you know, when we look at this video, no one wants to see scenes like this. I've been to that AMC theater many, many times. No one wants to see scenes like this. And so enforcing the proposal that you have on the books now, and you said you have 32 people who are behind you on this. How does the enforcement actually happen?
Well, we put a lot of discretion and trust in our police. The district commanders who are in charge of a specific area, many of them were specifically trained in the lead up to the DNC. Crowd management tactics, how to de-escalate, how to contain, how to identify the leaders within a crowd who are possibly the ones that might break out into violence. All of that is part psychology and part policing tactics. And we have a police department who knows how to do that. So if we would only take the shackles off them and let them do what they're trained to do, they could go into a crowd of 315-year-olds who are running crazy on the streets and do the things that are necessary to de-escalate and stop the chaos.
Yeah, would you say the approach, though, has to be a little different from, say, the DNC to when we are dealing with teens? So, you know, making sure that they actually do feel like they're welcome downtown, but also guiding them in the right direction.
Sure. I mean, there's a subtle difference when you have the average age of a crowd. You know, let's say it's 14 or 15. In the recent incident, we had a 14-year-old take a gun out of his backpack and shoot a 15-year-old. The incident before then, a 15-year-old shot a 46-year-old tourist. So even though the ages are relatively young, you know, the violence is still, in some cases, extreme. So the police have to treat it as a serious, potentially life-threatening situation, regardless of the age of the participants.
Yeah. So what happens next with your proposal? As we mentioned, you do have backers. You know, it would seem prudent that organizations like My Block, My Hood, My City, you know, Boxing Out Negativity, or some of these other organizations that are trying to, Big Brothers Big Sisters, you know, Boys and Girls Club, would need to be seated at the table with you to kind of come up with, all right, here's the strategy from a law enforcement perspective, here's what we need from a business perspective, and here's, you know, what we can do to help your organizations to work together to make a solution.
Yeah, we're doing that. I will have those organizations that you mentioned. They'll be participating in the public hearing on this issue. Some of them have said already they don't like this idea and they're going to tell us why. We'll hear them out. I'm also working with Representative LaShawn Ford. On May 3rd, we are hosting a community roundtable where leaders of the neighborhood that I represent, like Streeterville, are going to sit down with youth leaders, and we're going to have this difficult, possibly awkward conversation. We're going to see if we can find common ground. So that is all a part of this, and it's a necessary part of this in order to get some solutions.
Yeah, well, you're already getting some compromise along the way. So what is the next step timeline-wise for you?
Well, we don't have a lot of time. You know, as you just heard from Mike Kaplan, the warm weather's on the way within
Yeah.
a week or two. And that is always when the real problems start. The first weekend where you've got temperatures in the 70s or, you know, lower 80s, every year it's the same thing. That's when everybody just kind of goes crazy after a long, cold winter. We have to have this in place before then. So the clock is really ticking on this. We have the police that have been talking to us about how they're going to implement it. We're having some preliminary meetings to get prepared for that first warm summer weekend. I think we'll be ready.
And to be exact, what is going to happen? So we're not talking about an earlier curfew, we're talking about temporary curfews. What exactly does the temporary curfew look like?
Sure, it's a curfew that can be invoked by the police commanders, the people on the ground in response to a suddenly developing situation. You've got 200 teens that just got off the red line. What do? We declare a curfew for that moment, for that area, applying to unaccompanied minors only, you know, kids without any supervision who are there in large groups. We use that curfew to pull those children out of that dangerous and volatile situation, and then after the event has been diffused, the curfew expires. So it's a temporary situation. It's a tool that stays in the toolbox until we need it.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate the conversation. Come back and let us know how things develop.
I will.
Okay. All right.